Walking towards the clinic, I was greeted by a middle-aged man holding a sign that insisted, "You're going to hell." Once inside, I kept my gaze down, focusing on keeping my hands still. I wondered if we were all thinking the same thing. What is her story? I instantly regretted coming in by myself. I felt noticeably young and very alone, and I began to fight back tears. 5 months before I was told I was going to hell, I turned 20, and unlike the rest of my class from high school, I stayed home living with my parents, attended a local community college, and was working mornings as a barista. I felt locked into a very boring routine. My world felt very small, and I felt very naive. I still felt like such a child. It was then my cousin Victoria announced that she was getting married in Chicago, and I actually got to go for 6 whole days. The trip itself was my first time ever out of state, and even my very first time on a commercial plane. I didn't have to tell anyone what I was doing or where I was going. It was my first taste of independence, eating Chicago-style pizza at 2 a.m., exploring through Chinatown, and against my parents' wishes, getting my very first tattoo. On the last day, I just sat along the shore, observing the groups of people as they walked by. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I saw that reality was a lot larger than my imagination. The excitement shaking inside me turned into a fluttering of exhilaration. And back home, I didn't feel that exhilaration again until he had flirted with me. He was a regular at my work. Talking and casually flirting became the highlights of my shift. And he was older than me by 15 years. Except for the couple of movie titles from the 80s I couldn't recall, our age didn't matter very much. Our light conversations snowballed to hangouts and various concerts, bike rides to dinners, motorcycle rides down south to the country. As our friendship grew, so did our incredible chemistry. My past relationships had never reached this level. I was taken back, and I became very smitten. The realness of the love felt true. And slowly, life began making sense. And following my trip to Chicago, I went on 5 different trips. And when I came home, I would spend the rest of my time with him. I felt the happiest I had ever been. But leading up to the end of the year, I began to feel sick. And not the normal sickness of a flu or cold. My breasts began to feel tender, and I began fighting the urge not to vomit in the mornings. It was then I realized I couldn't remember when my last period was. I was taking oral contraceptives, but some days I missed, and I had to double up. Because I was on the pill, our use of condoms diminished, and I felt embarrassed to tell him that I was missing. I forced myself to purchase a pregnancy test. It read positive. Stunned, I told myself, the first one is always a mistake. And frantically, I called my cousin Bianca, my older cousin, who is like a sister to me. Sitting in her living room, everything felt normal for that brief moment. Her dog, Missy, a fluffy white Eskimo husky, laid at my feet, and Bianca was in the kitchen reheating yesterday's pizza. I had hidden the other test in my purse, and I gripped it tightly as I excused myself to go to the restroom, scared that somehow it might fall out. As I sat on the toilet waiting for the results, I peered at myself in the mirror. My already chubby cheeks looked fuller, and glancing down at my outfit, it seemed tight. I looked over at the test, and it was another positive. I looked at myself once more before stepping out. My face was flushed from holding back tears. I called out to her that I needed to leave, thankfully that she was in the kitchen and rushed out before I ever even heard an answer. When I got to my car, I cried. Multiple thoughts flooded my mind. Having this child would hold me back. I would have to give up school, work, traveling. I'm not ready. I'm too young. My parents, who are getting closer to 60, they couldn't possibly take care of a baby. And what about him? Would he even help? He would, right? Yet the possibility of becoming a single parent was still there. And I refused to be another statistic. And it was then I knew what I had to do. The clinic doors couldn't open fast enough, and after what felt like an eternity, a nurse eventually called me back, asking questions. Had I been using birth control? Were you okay with your decision? Do you want an ultrasound? And I said yes. I was 12 weeks pregnant, and the little bean they called was floating around in me, and he was very healthy. I felt selfish and terrified. I was purposely going against my religion as a Catholic. Religion is a very important aspect to the Hispanic culture, and growing up, some part of me really did fear that hell really existed. How could I go back home where my mother's love for our religion was reflected in the crucifixes all around our house? And I broke down. The nurse let me fall into her warm embrace, and the concerned doctor asked if I wanted some alone time. I shook my head, ensuring them that I was still sure of my decision. And I told the only two people I could, Bianca and him. I wanted Bianca to take me, and instantly she agreed. Telling him proved to be a bit more difficult. As I was walking out to leave for one of the nights that we were together, I turned back around. Slowly, I began to tell him what was going on. Tears were rolling down my cheeks as I told him about our baby, my upcoming appointments, and my choice. No negative emotions appeared on his face, only expressions of concern and understanding. The morning of the operation, with Bianca by my side, I didn't feel so alone as I did in the initial appointment. The whole staff, from the receptionist to the nurse, treated me with genuine kindness. I was not just another patient. I felt a quick flash of anger thinking of these caring individuals walking to their cars just like any other person going back home, only to be tormented by threats from protesters almost every single day. My doctor happened to be the same man who gave me my sonogram. He even remembered me. Sedated but awake, I recall only a few sentences as the operation was going on. I tried to block out any external noises by counting loudly in my head the tiny speckles that scattered on the ceiling. Then silence. It was over. As weeks went by, there was an unspoken understanding not to talk about my abortion. As life carried on, I didn't think much about my abortion until one of my dates with him. We went to see the movie Wild, a strong-willed woman defining herself after a drama-filled divorce. In one scene, the main character recalls her own abortion, but with regret. Some of her stories were almost like mine, and I felt for her. The emotional roller coaster she was going through, that no matter how sure you are, there's never an easy answer to such a difficult decision. And tears began to cloud my vision as I snuggled closer and he held me. And that was the closest we ever got to talking about my abortion. I personally wanted to forget and move on. For a long time, I was scared of the reactions I would get from family, friends, and even strangers. How would I get treated? How could I make people understand? I suffered through an ongoing internal battle. I felt guilty because I didn't feel guilty. Going through my abortion was emotional, but it was the right choice for my life, and whether some people can understand that or not. That time on the shore of Chicago, looking back on the endless stretches of buildings, I learned in that moment how I fit into the greater whole. Today, I'm looking forward to building my career as a city planner and developing an ongoing passion for community activism and social good, and to finally be able to tell family and friends, my mother, my best friend, after years passed about my abortion. I finally feel strong as I shared with her and my family and friends about the decision that was right for me. I am a woman, an individual, a human who knows what is right for myself as I move forward in building a life that is not only good for me, but also for my community. And today, I know I'm not alone. I am exhilarated.